Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me here today. I wanted to start at the kind of the beginning of your career. You were on Broadway,
Yeah.
and House of David is actually your first like on-screen acting kind of uh, job role.
Yeah.
Take me through the process of getting the role on House of David, because I know that you were actually told no, and you were given a second chance to audition. There was some prayer and fasting involved.
Yeah.
Take me through that.
It was kind of a funny experience. I was on Broadway for I think almost like 200 200 shows. No, 700 shows total. But I was there for 2 years, 3 years, and we were kind of getting closer to the end of our run, and I was thinking about like, well, what's going to come after? Like, what are the next plans? And I was, just auditioning like any other actor, and you do so many auditions, you're like, well, if you don't get it, whatever. But I had this dream for a very long time to portray King David. And it started right before I flew to New York to do my first off-Broadway show. And I was watching The Chosen, and I fell in love with it, and I got all of my family to watch it. I was like, you guys have to watch The Chosen. And they got into it, and we were talking about it at the dinner table, and it was the dinner right before I was to fly. And they said, well, you're an actor. You should do stuff like this. I said, yeah, that would be great. And they said, well, who would you play? Imagine if you had the chance. I said, I would love to portray King David. I would love to portray him. And they said, well, maybe. And time went on. And fast forward to the end of the run on Broadway for Kimberly Akimbo, and I got this audition, and it said for David. And I was like, King David? Sure enough, it is. So I called my mom. Mom, you're not going to believe the audition I got. I get a chance to portray King David, and maybe this is going to be amazing. It's a dream come true, and we're all celebrating. So I send in the audition, and I check in every week with my reps. Nothing. And then finally they get back to me and they said, hey, it's not going your way. Okay, that's fine. But this one stuck with me. I've auditioned for so many things, but this one, it hurt a little bit. I was like, man, I really wish I got the chance to do that. Fast forward 3 weeks later. My reps call me again. They say, hey, Michael, remember that David thing you auditioned for? I said, yeah. They said, well, we have another audition for you. It's for the same show. I guess it didn't work out with whoever they had, but they're going to have you re-audition different sides, but give it a shot. I said, yeah, absolutely. Call my mom. Mom, you're not going to believe the David thing is back, which never happens, by the way. Like, you audition, it's very rarely you audition for something and you get a no, and then you come back and they say, we actually do want to re-see you for this. And so when I called my mom this time, she wasn't celebrating. She said, Michael, I need you to do something for me. I need you to fast and I need you to pray. This is what you need to do. Okay. So I fasted and I prayed. And I prepared the audition and I sent it in. And a week later, I get a call. They're like, hey, John Irwin, the creator of the show, wants to fly out to New York and have lunch with you to see. I was like, great. If this is a good meeting, if this goes well, it'll last about 45 minutes to an hour. If it's a bad meeting, it'll last 20 minutes, and he'll say, I gotta catch a flight. I'll see you later, Michael. But then came the day, and we hung out for like 3-4 hours. They ended up kicking us out of our table. They're like, there's other customers waiting. You guys are here too long. And he said to me, you're gonna need to do the work. And I said, yeah, if there's one thing I can do, it's the work. And we then flew out to LA to do the screen test. And there was a waiting period of a week between then. And I knew that whoever were to play David, there would be a specific way that it has to be done. Not only is the acting and the role and the spirit of the person does it have to fit the character of David, but the music aspect of it is important. And so I knew it wasn't just going to be in English, it had to be in Hebrew, the Eastern ornamentation, all of it. So I went online and I learned the Shema prayer. In Hebrew, it's Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, which is in English, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And there's a sung version of it in Hebrew. It's called a prayer. And so I learned it, and I sent it over to the team, hoping to inspire them that even if they don't cast me with this screen test, this is my last shot, that they would cast someone who can do it this way, because this is what this role deserves. And thankfully they really liked it, and they said, yeah, we want to incorporate the Hebrew singing into the show. And went into the screen test, came back, and they said, it's not a yes, but it's not a no. Amazon's not convinced yet. They saw the poet side of David, they need to see the warrior king side. I was like, okay, well, give me sides that show that. And so anyway, so another week went by, and they flew me out to Greece for another screen test, makeup, hair, costume, everything. And they had different scenes this time around, and finished it. I came back, and there came the waiting period for 2 weeks. Just nail biting. I was like, praying every day, and like, God, please don't get my hopes up, right? Please, And finally, it was one day I wake up, and John Gunn, another executive producer and writer of the show with John Irwin, calls me. He goes, hey, we have questions about the music. Could we give you a call real quick on FaceTime? I was like, sure. So he FaceTimes me. And he was like, are you up? And I was still in bed. I'm like, yeah, I'm up. And I was putting on my clothes and stuff. And he goes, hey, so we didn't actually call you about the music. We kind of have some rough news. We didn't know how else to deliver it to you, but here it goes. And I put my head down. I'm like, all right. And he goes, you're going to be spending 4 months with us in Greece because you're going to portray David. And that's when I found out I got the role. But only then I knew. I didn't cry. I was happy, and then I got really stressed. I'm like, okay, now the work really begins, But
what was it about King David that drew you to him? Why did you want to portray King David?
King David is a very, very pivotal figure, especially in the Old Testament, because everything about King David is really pointing to Christ. Everything about him. I like to think of Psalm 22, the psalm that Christ quotes on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? And later in the psalm, David writes, they pierce my hands and feet, they divide my garments among them. They say, he delights in the Lord, let him save him. And you read Psalm 22, you're like, this is Jesus. And so, David, very much, born in Bethlehem, died in Jerusalem, and the whole, he wasn't the perfect person. He had a lot of mistakes, but everything about David really points us to Christ, and that it's about the heart. When David was being anointed, God said to Samuel, do not look at his outward appearance, for God does not see as man sees. Man sees the outward appearance, God looks at the heart. And so there's so many, you could break down his story for an entire year, and you could talk about his life, but the essentials of it is that David is about the heart. Do we love God? Are we willing to lay down our life for Christ? So that's why I love him. I think he's the culmination of what it means to be human, to be broken, but still find redemption. And there's a lot of similarities between him and Peter. I was talking to the father at my church, and he pointed out, he was like, well, it's very similar to Judas and Peter, Saul and David. So it's kind of that relationship, but in the Old Testament.
Oh, I like that. So you're a recent convert to Catholicism.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know, what is it that first piqued your interest in Catholicism?
I grew up Coptic Orthodox, and I love my roots and my faith in the Orthodox Church, and it's me becoming Catholic is not a rejection of that, but I feel like converting to Catholicism is more about answering a calling from God. And for me, it started really, I stumbled into St. Patrick's Cathedral in Manhattan. And it's always filled with tourists. But I went in and I sat in one of the pews and I put my head down, and it was as if nothing existed. And I looked at the altar, knowing that's where the Eucharist lays, and I'm like, I want the Eucharist. And I remember just like feeling this moment of extreme holiness. I was like, this is where the Eucharist is. And I just put my head down and I started like weeping for like an hour straight, like not praying, nothing, just weeping. And it felt like nobody else was there except for me and God. And I left the cathedral that day, and I think a seed was planted, and I started going to Mass. And maybe it wasn't as, I also went to like a bunch of other churches, and it wasn't as fun as a Protestant church, you know. Maybe not. Sometimes standing up and sitting down and kneeling down, it can get repetitive. But I loved it. I was like, this is home. God is calling me here, and it just kept getting louder and louder and louder. And so, learning about David, learning about the Old Testament, the things that David did, and kind of the historical aspect of the church. Everything was just pointing me to the Catholic faith. And so when I finished season 2 of David, I had some friends who went to a nearby parish, and I said, hey, can I go to Mass with you guys? He said, yeah, sure. And at the end there, you're a Coptic Orthodox, can you not take the Eucharist? I'm like, I don't know. And we kind of had all these questions, and there was a priest in the diocese that they put me in touch with, and they said, he's going to have a lot of answers. So I reached out to him, and I was just like, hey man, I'd love to have breakfast and just ask you some questions about Catholicism. Okay. He was very gracious, and went out to breakfast, and him and I just talked for a good hour or two. And the more he kept talking, the more I was like, yeah, no, this feels right. This feels like home. And at the end he said, well, do you want to be Catholic? I said, yes. And we kind of just looked at each other, and I was like, what does that look like? And he goes, well, it's not exactly a baptism, because the Catholic Church does accept the sacraments of the Orthodox Church. What you would do is a profession of faith. We would have a Mass for you. And, you just pick the day, and I can do it for you here at the parish that we go to. And, I could do that for you. I said, okay, I want to do it. And then we were trying to find time, and, this day wasn't going to work, and he was busy this day, and I was busy that day. But it landed on a day, August 21st. And it just happened to be the day where my family was in town from Egypt, and they were about to leave the next day, and it was the only day I could get them all together to celebrate with me. And so we went to the church, and we were there. Obviously, we were doing the Mass, and he told me to bring a candle, and so I brought the candle, and he lights the candle off the altar. But then during the readings of the Mass, one of the readings was Psalm 89, and if you know about Psalm 89, I could pull it up for you. It was kind of weird as he started talking about it. Everybody all just kind of looked at each other, and I've been talking to him for a while at that point, and we would talk about David a lot, and how to kind of portray David from this Catholic perspective. And so during the reading, he starts reading Psalm 89, and he says, "Then you spoke in a vision to your faithful one and said, I have set the crown on one who is mighty. I have exalted one chosen from the people. I have found my servant David. With my holy oil I have anointed him. My hand shall always remain with him." And it goes on to say, "He shall cry to me, you are my Father, my God, and the rock of my salvation. I will make him firstborn, the highest of the kings of the earth. Forever I will keep my steadfast love for him, and my covenant with him will stand firm." And he's reading this, and I'm like, "Father, thanks for setting that up. That's very sweet. Thanks." And so he goes up for the homily, and he goes, "So just in case you're wondering, Michael, if I chose that for you, no. You happen to pick the day where this is the reading. And it only repeats every 3 years, and this stuff is set up years in advance. So I think I think God is trying to speak to you and telling you that, you are home. And one of the other readings that day was Peter, after Christ appeared to him after the crucifixion, and he says to Peter, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter says, "Yes, Christ, I love you." And so he says, "Feed my sheep." And he says that 3 times. So still that David and Peter connection. And he said to me, as you take the Eucharist in the Catholic Church, I urge you to say to the Lord, "Lord, I love you," just like Peter did. And yeah, it was a really just beautiful day, and it felt like, I felt like I was home, and I feel God's love every day with me, but it was a very special day. It felt like the prodigal son who returned and his father accepted him with open arms.
Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing all that. So how has your faith been impacted by portraying David?
I mean, it's been, in every way it's been impacted. I think one of the biggest things that has affected me is learning about why God chose David and why he rejected Saul. And ultimately, Saul was a prideful king. And in the beginning it says he was humble, but you look at his history, his beginning, his anointing as a king, and really you see not humility, but you see low self-confidence. And as the attention and the love started to become on him, this low self-confidence became ego, covering for this low self-esteem. And so it makes sense that he became prideful. But rather, David did not have self-confidence. He was humble. And humility is not about, bowing down to others. No, humility is about seeing the true value of something and understanding truth. Humility is truth. And so, as David, God chose David because of his humble heart. And a humble heart is a heart that's willing to follow God. It's a heart that's willing to listen to him and do as he commands. Versus a prideful heart is going to choose my wants, my needs, my selfish desires over him. A selfish heart is going to place yourself even with God, which is what happened with Saul, ultimately why he was rejected. But God says, "I will choose a man after my own heart. I will choose a man who does what I tell him." And that kind of clicked something in my brain. It's like, no, God chose David because David loved God, and thus David was going to follow God's commandments. He was going to do God's will on earth. And so it really, once that clicked, I was like, oh, it's not about me, it's about him. I need to follow him, and I need to listen to his commandments, and I need to put myself aside. I need to not think about myself. And really, it's freeing. It's a freeing thing to just, put yourself aside and live for Christ. Because who wouldn't want to do that? Actually, a lot of people wouldn't want to do that. But it's for me, I think that's the most beautiful thing, to put ourselves aside and to live for him. And so thinking about that and understanding that, in my life, I need to follow God and follow his commandments and follow what he wants for me.
Do you have a favorite psalm?
Yes. I'll give you top 3. Okay. Psalm 22, Psalm 8, Psalm 88 and 89. So it's top 4.
Okay.
But I think Psalm 22, because obviously that for me, that's one of the most important ones. It's the prophetic psalm about Christ. Mm-hmm. And so I love that divine connection between David and Christ. I think that's why it's number 1 for me. I also love Psalm 8 because it's a small window into David's heart, and David's kind of pondering about Christ's creations, and he's sitting there and he says, when I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, what are human beings that you are mindful of them, mortals that you care for them? Yet you have made them a little lower than God and crowned them with glory and honor. You have given them dominion over the works of your hands. You have put all things under their feet. And so you can imagine David sitting there in his castle, looking up at the stars, as so many of us do, and just admiring God's creation. Instead of thinking, I am the mightiest person around, he is giving glory to God and thanking him, and is in a moment of humility. So that one, it's a short psalm, but I think it's really beautiful. Psalm 88 is the most depressing one out of all of them. But all of us have those moments, you know, and we need this reminder that we are not alone in our pain. We are not alone in our anguish, in our suffering, and that the Bible is not just filled with great stories, it's filled with stories of heartbreak, and all of us are going to feel that. But that's a part of humanity. And Psalm 89, because it's how God spoke to me, and when I became Catholic. Yeah.
Love that. With your faith being such an important part of your life, how does that, play a role in dealing with now fame, with, I'm sure, the noise that surrounds you, with like future projects that you might take on? How does that play a role now, your faith?
I mean, my faith comes first always, right? Yeah, and it's really simple. I mean, like, I like to joke around, I'm church famous. I'm not like famous. It's like if I go to mass or if I go to whatever, that's when I'll get recognized. But if I'm out in the street, I'm doing great. So it's really the best of both worlds, you know. And then, yeah, I mean, I really don't think about what's ahead too much. I know God has taken care of me in the past, and all that stress did no help. And so everything that will come will be of His will, and all the challenges He's going to guide me through. And so I put my trust in Him, and I'm good.
So something that I think tends to happen when you portray a biblical character, because I know Jonathan Rumi has talked about this with like people seeing him as like Jesus, and obviously he's playing Jesus, but
Right.
They tend to see you as like holier. Does that add pressure? How do you, how does that affect you?
See, I don't think I get holier because David was...
That's true.
David has had his downfalls,
Yeah.
you know. I think it's, you know what, the interactions I do get are, hey, your show means so much to me. It inspired me to go back and read scripture, to read about David, to read the Psalms. That's my end goal. That's the only thing I ever wanted out of this. And so I guess I don't have to deal with the pressure that Jonathan has to deal with. Jonathan also has it different because he's leading a TV series as Jesus. So it's not a film where it happens once and you're good. No, this is 9 years out of his life, 10 years out of his life, portraying Jesus. And so people build a relationship with him, and really nobody was there to pave the path for him. He paved his own path. And I respect him so much for that, you know, for going where he is going and leading as he is now with having no direction. That can only come from Christ. And so I have the utmost love and respect for Jonathan, seriously. And yeah, he's been a guide to me too, you know. He's given me some pretty amazing words of wisdom. And you know, he kind of encouraged me. He goes, you should talk to someone about, because I went to mass with him before I was Catholic, and he said, oh, you know how to do this. I said, yeah, I've been going for a little bit. He gave me this one tip. We were at the end of that mass. I think the deacon went up and said, you know, if anybody here is new or if you're visiting, please stand up. We'd love to welcome you. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm new and I'm visiting, so I'm good. And he just goes, do not stand up, Michael. Whatever you do, do not stand up. I said, okay. He goes, you don't know how to be famous yet? So let me teach you. And I just sat there and I was like, yes, sir. And, you know, he's so funny. But anyways, he was like, you should go reach out to a priest if you're going to mass this much. And, you know.
Well, he was right.
Yeah.
So in actually our first interview that we had together, you told me that you are always trying to find the heart of David, like when you're portraying him in House of David. How do you allow the biblical character to sort of increase and you to decrease?
Great question. Well, I think it starts with Scripture, right? I inform everything about David from Scripture, and looking at not only his great moments, but his tough moments. One of the moments that sticks out to me is with Abigail and her husband, and how David and David's men took care of his sheep, and they expected food, expected a reward in return. And when they didn't get that, they were going to kill that man. Granted, he was a very evil and selfish man, the husband of Abigail. But having that level of reaction to that man showed a different side to David. It showed his anger. And obviously we know how he committed adultery later in his life, committed murder later in his life. So there's so small windows into these little stories that kind of inform you, like, during this period of time, he was angry. He was angry that he was being chased by Saul. There was tumultuous feelings on the inside. And he had a desire, he wanted to be loved. And ultimately when that's directed in the wrong direction, it leads to lust, and it leads to anger and murder. If it wasn't for Abigail, he probably would have killed her husband, And so that's kind of a window into David's heart on the more darker side. But then on the brighter side, I always just loved the speech that he said to Goliath. He said, you come to me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. So already he's beginning that his weapon is not his sling, his weapon is not his staff, his weapon is the Lord, and he knows it as a youth. And he continues, he says, this day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you, and I will take your head from you. This day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, so that all the earth may know there is a God in Israel. That is confidence. Confidence in God's plan, confidence in God's will. Even if he is scared, even if his humanity, even if his human emotions, if he can't control them, he trusts God more. He loves God more than his human emotions. And he says, so that all this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's. This is directed not only at the camp of the Philistines, not only to Goliath, but to the entire armies of the Israelites and the Philistines. And he's telling his people, you guys are so afraid of Goliath, but no, it's not your weapons that are going to save you. It's not your muscles that are going to save you. It's not his stature that's going to defeat you. It's God that is going to guide you and protect you and defend you in all of this. So that for me was huge. That's a huge window into who he is. And the more you keep reading about him, the more we understand David, the more we ponder about the actions that he took, the more we understand his heart, and that he truly was a man who loved God with every part of his being. And just like all of us, we fall and we falter. But David is one who came back and recognized his mistakes and recognized his sins in front of God and asked for forgiveness and repented.
Yeah. Something I've heard you say in interviews is that you think the show should be called House of the Lord instead of House of David. Can you elaborate on that? Because I really liked that statement.
Well, why is David important? David is important because of God. If it wasn't for God choosing him, if it wasn't for God accomplishing all the things through David, David is just a vessel. And so that's why for me the show's about God, because God is the one moving through him. The reason why people are gravitated to David is because the Holy Spirit is in him. That for me is why it should be called House of the Lord. It's for him, it's by him.
Season 2 of House of David is coming out right now on Prime Video as we speak.
That's right.
What can you tell us about Season 2?
So much. What can I tell you? Well, okay. I really, really love this season. I think I'm extremely proud of it, and proud of the work that we've done this time, because it is truly a transformative season. And you know, in the time of David, people asked, how is this guy going to defeat Goliath? He's just a youth. He's just, you know, blah, 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 blah. He's a shepherd. You know, in the same way, this time around in this season, people are questioning, how is this guy going to be a commander? How is he going to lead Saul's armies? But we see that transformation that God takes him on. We see that complete switch in demeanor, complete switch in confidence in his build. He's a different man by the end of the season than he is at the beginning. And it's really indicative of how much God can work in our lives if we let him. So this season for me is a season of transformation. It's a season of war. A lot of blood is shed this time. And but it's also, everything is just bigger. There's romance, there's drama, there's a lot of fighting, you know, it's super, super fun. And there's so much more biblical material that I think is going to be really informative for people. We really dive into the friendship between David and Jonathan this season. And that friendship it's one of the only kind of main friendships that we see in the Old Testament between two guys, and it's really a model for us as men today of how do we express love for one another, how do we show friendship, what is true friendship, what does love and friendship look like, and played by an amazing actor, Ethan Kai. I truly love that man. He's phenomenal through and through, and his performance is amazing. And yeah, I think there's a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, I've seen the first 4 episodes, and
Nice.
it's great.
You haven't seen 5?
I haven't seen 5 yet. I had to. I know we stopped right there, but I've got it.
You have 5?
Yeah, I have. You know, because I get the early screen.
You got to watch 5 tonight, and then let me know. What you
Okay.
think.
Okay, I will.
Okay. Watch it on the plane.
I have to watch it with my husband. We watch it together.
Deal.
So when I get home.
Deal.
All right. My last question for you, Michael, is what do you hope people are taking away from this show?
I really hope people take away the point of the story, which is that everything about David, to go back to what I said earlier, is about the heart. What does your heart look like? I hope people ponder this question. Do we love God? Do we love him as much as we should? Christ says to lay one's life for another, that is the greatest love we can show. Are we willing to lay down our lives for Christ? In the same manner that David did. David was put in so many life-threatening situations because of God, and God led him through. Are we willing to trust him to lead us through those same challenges? And ultimately above this, do we love God? That is the most important question. So I hope people ask themselves that question. And I hope it inspires them to go on a deeper faith journey. And for me, I ultimately hope it inspires them to grow closer to Christ. So,
Michael, it was a great blessing speaking with you today. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks so much. Yeah, such amazing questions. This is awesome.
Oh, thank you.